Thank you all for coming out today. This is the first of 3 seminars I'm going to be holding. We're going to be covering kind of from the foundation right now, trying to build up, cover some basic aspects of RV ownership. In our second seminar, 3 weeks from today, on February 22nd, we're going to be talking about a little bit more advanced topics, a few other maintenance things that can be done. I will also be responding to some feedback at that point. And then in our third seminar on March 14th, I will be addressing pretty much probably all participant or attendee feedback and structuring that third seminar along that way. This seminar is being recorded. Marie from the Thervkeys is here recording it. We'll have that posted. I will be posting the slides that you see. I'll be posting that in the next 24 hours so that those are available to review. They will be in the video as well. And we'll be updating our website. So you'll see our web address. I've got some cards up here. Kimberly, So we've got some cards we can pass out at the end of the talk. I've got about an hour of material that kind of depends on how much questions and feedback we get and where we go with it. And I'll be here for another hour afterwards answering questions and getting some feedback. But then I've got a refrigerator laying on a floor somewhere in the park that I've got to get back to. So we're going to try to keep it real tight there. All right, so if we're all ready, let's jump into it. All right, so we're going to be talking, introduce Kim and myself a little bit, go over a couple high points. We're going to be talking about a maintenance overview. We're going to be looking at a pre-trip checklist and whether you really just want a pre-trip checklist. We're going to talk about some propane basics, some simple fixes that if you call me to your trailer or RV motorhome to fix, you might think, gee, I could have done that myself. We'll talk lastly about a little bit of electrical safety, and if we can, we'll get to some slide seal maintenance, and we'll go from there. Again, I want to keep this a little bit informal. If you have something, you have a question along the way, raise your hand. We'll either talk about it right then or we'll come back to it later if there's a better section. Okay, so who is C2 RV Services? My wonderful wife, Kimberly, retired Master Sergeant from the USAF. Thank you. And to all service members. She is a certified inspector from the RV Inspection Association of America, and she is a registered technician, so she's gone through the basic technician training before she became an inspector. And so she is the inspection half of C2 RV repair and inspection. Myself, I am a licensed mechanical engineer. Please don't hold it against me. I ran a machine shop before I got my degree, so I do know how to make things. I spent 20 years in the semiconductor equipment design industry, and I also did application development for vision inspection software. So I had a lot of user interface experience, how the user wants things to run, how the user needs to operate equipment. After that, what I didn't list there is I taught at Boise State for 10 years in design and HVAC. And the last 2 years of it, Kimberly and I undertook an interesting program where we were faculty. I was a faculty in residence, and her and I lived in an apartment in a dorm on campus along with 30 first-year engineering students. I probably have more interesting stories from that couple of years than any other 10-year period of my life. I really enjoyed it. That really tested my patience, but I really enjoyed it. And now I'm a certified technician with the RVTAA, partner organization to the RVIAA. And I'm having a blast helping people out and solving problems. So that's why we're doing this today. Okay, one thing that I want to make sure you know is that if I talk about any particular product or any particular solution, I receive zero monetary endorsement. Okay, I think that's important to say, especially if I promote something like a Hughes Autoformer or a 3-in-1 slide seal. I want to make sure you know that that is an unbiased opinion and just somebody who uses a product. And lastly, we're going to be talking about some things that can be pretty dangerous through this series. There are some things that I'm going to mention that I could say you can check this or you can do that. It is up to your own decision about whether you want to approach that. please be very careful, especially when it comes to the area of electricity. I myself found out that I wasn't quite up to par on my electricity skills, and I was reminded the other day working on an appliance that I was wearing a metal wedding ring. So I speak from experience that we have to be careful around this stuff. Okay, checklist. We're going to look at maintenance checklists here. One of the things that is so easy to find in the world of RVs are different checklists. So as you can see, here's a general RV maintenance checklist. You can see that it starts off with monthly, goes into semi-annual or seasonal, goes into annual. Just talking about monthly and some of these things that people don't pay attention to. This is very small right now, but I'm going to cover the high topics of it. Talks about running the generator, running the engine, and checking the batteries every month. You may say, well, I've gone a long time without checking my batteries. You'd be surprised how many people have problems with their 12-volt system, their refrigerator control, their furnace control, because their batteries have actually depleted to the point where it's not providing enough voltage to properly run the computers in those devices. So you call somebody out to work on your furnace and it's not quite operating right, and you find out your battery's not doing well. Keep an eye on those, especially checking the fluid levels in your flooded batteries. If they're not sealed or if they're not lithium, make sure to check those fluid levels and keep them topped up. We go on to testing safety detectors. Kicking tires and weight distribution, really taking a look at your tires, especially if you're more mobile than stationary. Things happen really, really quick. Talking about deep cleaning on a semi-annual basis, water filtration. Here it says the water filter should be a semi-annual basis. I know areas of the country, and I believe this to be one of them, correct me if I'm wrong, you should be checking your water filters every 3 months. Really hard water or dirty water depends on your water source. If you're on city water, it's going to be better than if you're on a well. Keep an eye on those filters. They do clog up. You do lose water pressure. Take a look for damage. Take a look for what happens to your RV over time. You may think your RV is all together, everything's holding good, but there might be something holding on by the last thread of a screw. We have a hanging light fixture over our kitchen island, and I noticed that it looked a little bit off at one point, and this was my 8-month dealer warranty visit that I brought, and brought it into the dealer. I said, hey, why don't you take a look at that? I've heard of those falling in this unit on the road. And when I went to go pick up the unit, the gentleman said, you're glad that I looked at it. I have a feeling it probably would have fallen on your next trip down the road. It was just in by the last screw. None of these maintenance checklists will tell you to check screws. Have a habit of every once in a while walking around the rig looking for a screw head that's sticking out a little bit farther than it should be. Take a poke around there. Have a good 11-in-1, 15-in-1 screwdriver to switch tips out and hit all of the different types of screws on your vehicle. I'll pull up another one here real quick. You can see here pre-chipped checklist, both inside and outside the RV. If you don't have a pre-trip checklist that you're going to make sure that you've got your awnings and your steps up, and yes, some steps are still capable to be in and out and up. If you don't have one of those lists, I really implore you to use it. It's actually gotten to the point now, I've moved the RV around so much, I have to remember to tell myself to use that list. A few months ago, when we stopped in Texas, one of the things that I kind of let go of on my list was removing the Band-Aid on the metal latches, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. And so we left the Band-Aid on when we were driving down the road. Cabinet door opened while the slide was in. Kimberly went to go put out the slide. I was standing outside and I heard a large slam. The door had opened up and the slide had pushed the door and snapped it off the cabinet. Those Band-Aids, we put the Band-Aids over the magnets to make it easier to open up the cabinet doors. If you haven't heard of that trick, it's a wonderful little thing. Buy a box of 99-cent Band-Aids. I use them all the time. and put a couple of those on the magnetic latches. It makes it really easy to go into the cabinet without yanking the cabinet door off. But have something on your checklist to remove those before you travel, and don't overlook that. Okay, and I would say, here's a great one you can download. Make your own for your own decorations, your own particular hardware, the things that are in your RV. Any questions on checklists before we go on? Okay, as I mentioned, vibration is the enemy. So a lot of people talk about the fact that RVs are rolling earthquakes. I grew up in California, I'll admit it. I moved out when I could. But an earthquake is kind of a rolling thing. It does some damage, but you don't really see an earthquake as something that's really bad. But if you think about it, when your trailer's going down the road and you're sitting in the tow vehicle or you're sitting in the front seat of your motorhome, you've got cushion. You've got kind of what I'd say a human comfort setup. Your axles, your wheel bearings, your refrigerator, they don't have those comforts. They're heading every single vibration on the road. So I go back to checking those screws, checking things out. Wheel bearings. If you feel like the wheel bearings, you can go a year, you can go 2 years without checking them out. Remember, every single vibration that trailer or RV has is going through that bearing on the wheel. So don't take those for granted. It's very cheap insurance to keep you on the road. How about the what? The P-trap underneath the sink being loose? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's something I walk around, I check vibration, everything else. The P-traps are just snugged into the pipes because there's no pressure there. Those commonly will open up when you travel. That might be a good thing for your arrival checklist. Double check your P-traps before you get using the water, because you get to your camp and the last thing you're thinking about is maintenance and general stuff. You've been there for a day and all of a sudden you see water coming out from under your sink. And it can build up very fast before you realize it. Okay, so we're going to talk about a pre-trip checklist, but I'm going to suggest that is secondary. Everybody talks about a pre-trip. I want to walk around, make sure the rig's ready to go. So my suggestion is this. Your son or daughter is, your oldest son or daughter is having their first wedding. You've got to get to Chicago. You leave yourself just 3 days because you wanted to stay down here in beautiful Florida and not head up to Chicago till you absolutely had to. Okay? Then you walk around the rig the night before you leave and you've got a broken leaf spring. Guess who's buying a last-minute airline ticket to go see their kids get married because they didn't check out earlier? So that's where the idea comes in. Use a post-trip checklist. Like the P-trap in the sink. Check the leaf springs. Check those kind of things. You want to do that after you arrive. You don't have to do it the day after, 2 days after, but do it several days before you leave. Let somebody like myself have a little bit of time to address the issue, get the replacement parts, maybe do the warranty claim and do all of the things that are necessary to get that handled for you so that the next time you pull out, you're good to go. Those major things can take some time to get done. Axles, leaf springs, brake lines, shackles. These can happen at any point. When we were headed to Texas, we stopped the night before we got to our destination in Texas. We stopped and a guy had pulled in and he was laying under the back of his trailer. He had just pulled in too, coming from Tennessee. He was meeting somebody there that was going to meet him, buy the trailer, and then haul it to New Mexico, I think it was, or Arizona. Between his last fuel stop and there, not 30 minutes, a shackle hanger had broken on his frame. And that was within a 30-minute span outside of the campground. And so the next day he had 2 technicians show up, one with a trailer-mounted welder. They were working on his rig all day to re-weld that leaf spring. So these things are really, really important. Leveling jacks. Good to check those out before you go to lower them and unhitch. I know that I generally haven't, but I ran across an interesting thing. You know, the leveling jack's right behind the back wheels of the fifth wheel. And I cut a corner one time on a military base, couldn't get into the roads, and my trailer went over the curb. And as it went off the curb, I was terrified that that back jack would have slammed the curb and bent over. Double check your jacks before you lower them and make sure that they're not bent sideways. That'll really help you out too. Okay, now we talk about the pre-chip. You know your RV is in good condition. You're about ready to leave. Don't overlook the pre-chip. Don't overlook your tire pressures. Especially if your tires have been sitting for several months like we are right now. When we leave in April, we need to make sure our tires are good to go right before we leave. And it's a good idea not to trust that the TPMS is sending the exact number. Generally, they stay in calibration. Generally, everything is good. But it's going to be that one time that something's not working right and your tire's sitting at 45 and you think it's sitting at 55 or 60, something like that, you're going to need to know that your pressure is off. So it's a very good idea to check them cold. Now, people ask, cold, what does that mean? Generally, before you start moving, it's fine. Whether it's, you know, air temperature at 70 degrees or whatnot, those will go up to 100, 110 degrees like nobody's business, especially on those heavy-duty E and E-load tires, those kind of things. So mid-trip walk-around, this is really not a bad idea. If you stop for fuel, make sure to just give a quick walk-around. Something hasn't happened mid-trip. Like I said, this gentleman lost one of his axle connection points mid-trip. He didn't see it at the gas station. He thinks that he had checked it, but he doesn't know. Make it a habit just to walk around. Something didn't happen to fall off the back mid-trip. You've still got your spare tire, bikes, generator, whatever's back on the back bumper, if anything. Make sure your slides are still in nice and tight. Storage doors. The Alliance line, I own an Alliance. They're not perfect. First time we were driving down the road, one of my storage doors kicked open, was sitting straight out. This is the first time I'm driving my fifth wheel. And it's literally over the hood of a car that was passing me on that side. And fortunately, the car swerved out a little bit. We got over and we shut it. And we found the root cause behind it, but they do pop open. Propane basics. One of the things that I wanted to mention, your propane tank has a date on it. It's a little bit tough to see in this image, but this one says 04. It's got a large A looking symbol and then 21. That was the month and year of manufacture. Current DOT regulations, and they've changed a little bit over the years, but current DOT regulations require recertification after 10 years. I am licensed in the state of Florida to install and remove propane devices from an RV. I'm also got some other extensions on that, but that's all that matters. What I'm not licensed for in Florida is to fill propane tanks. I am licensed in Oregon to fill propane tanks, and I can tell you that if that date is out of spec, I don't touch them. The other thing that you need to do is look on the bottom of the tank. You can see a little bit of corrosion on this tank. The number one place for corrosion on a propane tank is at the bottom, where it sits down there. You've got condensation on the tank always going down there. You'll see rust down at the bottom. If you've got significant corrosion on your tank, no matter how old it is, be careful about filling it. That's 150 psi, and if a seam splits on propane, propane expands 270 times its volume when it reaches the atmosphere. That's why propane cylinders are so dangerous to handle if they're not safe to handle. Automatic changeover regulators. Everybody's seen one of these on theirs. You've probably seen this on your unit if you have cylinders that you can take in and out. And I've seen a lot of people operate their valve straight down or this valve straight in the middle. Anybody know what that does? So that when you run out at 3 in the morning, you're not going to go switch and get the other tank. You're done, right? Now, I know there are people, and both of these work equally well. There's no difference between them. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, now I couldn't find an image with a nice little lever pointed over to this side, but pretend it is. So we get 2 full tanks. We point our lever over to the right. The system's going to take from the right tank. When the right tank is empty, The little window that's partially covered up there will turn red. The internals of the regulator will automatically start pulling from the left, but your lever is still going to be pointed to the right. So when you see your lever pointed to one tank and you see a red window, that's telling you, careful, that tank is empty. That's your time to go get more propane. Now, I've talked to a lot of people, and this is all preference. I've talked to a lot of people that say, I leave my other tank turned off. That way I know when this happens, I have to go get more propane. And I say, great, if you like getting up at 3 in the morning when it's 50 degrees in your trailer and going out and switching tanks, great, that works. I would suggest that if you check this window every 4 or 5 days, set a little calendar reminder. Check it every 4 or 5 days. And you walk up and you see that little red window and it's pointing to the right, you know you have to go fill your tank, okay? So it's a way to do it so that you don't have to get out of bed in the middle of the night, or you don't run out of propane mid-meal. You know, you're hungry and your family's hungry, you're expecting to put dinner on the table, and all of a sudden you find out the oven's been off for 15 minutes because you ran out of propane. So not a pleasant experience, right? So that's how you operate those. It's pretty simple to operate when this happens. Again, levers to the right, tank's empty. You just simply turn off the tank valve, disconnect it. The system is separated. You're not going to harm anything. Go get your one tank filled, reconnect it, open it up, and then move your valve to the other side. I never move my valve to the other side until I've got that full tank there, because that's just my checklist to say, now I'm full and I'm on that side and my other side is my reserve. Just a simple way of doing it. If you search for, and again, this will be online, but if you search for Flame King 2-stage cylinder on Amazon, or 2-stage regulator, sorry, which is this device, if anything I've said is unclear, they've got a cool little video that just walks right through it. It's actually the most interesting educational video I've seen in a while, and just how to operate this thing. And again, both of these operate the same way, they just look differently. Here, that red window you can see in the 4, it operates exactly the same way. I use a Mopeka Pro sensor. Mopeka, M-O-P-E-K-A. They sell 2 or 3 types of sensors. The one that I use right now is called a Mopeka Pro. It's a round disc. It's about 3 inches in diameter. It's gray. And you can buy those either for horizontal tanks or vertical cylinders. You put it on the bottom. You set it. How big is a tank? What orientation is a tank? And it tells you on your phone what your tank levels are at, and you can name each one. And in fact, I brought both my tanks the other day to Bob to fill up, and I have ODS written on one and DS written on the other. And he said, does it really matter which one goes on which side? And I said, no. I said, my sensors are that way, and so now when I hook them back up, I know what it is on my phone, right? So I know, oh, my off-door side tank, ODS, is empty. I need to go fill that one up. I don't have to guess and check which one's empty. But those Mopeka tank sensors are extremely useful, and they can be set with an alarm to when it reaches, let's say, 20%, it'll tell you on your phone, you've got 20% left in one tank. One of the things to note, please don't lay cylinders on the side. Well, you can, but then the problem is the protection device. So the top of the cylinder has a valve. On the valve, you'll see OPD, Overflow Protection Device. That does 2 or 3 different functions. One of those functions is to ensure that if your propane lines get cut and you have a sudden outrush of propane, there's a little ball inside that system that will slam shut, and it will keep propane from flowing out in a rush. That ball will slam shut if you lay your propane cylinder on its side. So you might have experienced before, you go down to a Suburban Propane or wherever, or front gate, you get more propane, you go back, you put it on the grill, you turn it on, and you can't light your grill because nothing's flowing, but you've got a full tank of propane. What's happened is the cylinder has probably been leaned over too far or laid horizontally, and that ball has slammed shut. There's two ways to fix that. The approved way to do it, I'd say the standard way to do it, is to hook it back up to a tank and to try to fill it again, and it pushes the ball out of the way. The other way to do it, and it's the way that we do it actually in the trade, is take the tank and just tap it on the ground 2 or 3 times. Just knock that ball loose. And I'm not talking about slamming it down. I'm not talking about pounding. But it's just nice, gentle tap, and all you're doing is knocking that ball loose. It's just a little tap on the ground. And then you put it back in, everything's safe. All right. You might smell a bit of propane, like when you're connecting that Acme nut, you are pressing in on that valve. You might release a little bit of propane out of that. So if you connect your pigtail and connecting your tank, you smell a little bit of propane, don't be alarmed at that point. Tighten it up, turn on your valve, let the system air out. If you still smell it, then shut it down and get some help servicing it. Use some leak detector fluid, have somebody come out and help service that. Also, if you get your carbon monoxide or what do they call it? It's really an ethane sensor, a little black sensor down near your floor. Talks about carbon monoxide, propane, methane, butane, any of those. If that goes off, and it's not just a chirp, make sure that you address the cause. I had a call on that 2 weeks ago. Somebody was saying the alarm was going off. A neighbor came over, helped them, checked out, looked like everything was okay. The alarm kept going off, but every half hour the alarm would go off and she would open up the door, open up the windows. It would go away. She would close the rig up, and about a half hour later it would go off again. Turned out when she was cleaning, she had bumped her oven knob and turned on the oven. So the alarm was doing its job. So trust the alarm unless you prove otherwise. And the last thing, depending on the state where you're at, it can be highly illegal to work on an RV or to work on a propane system that is not yours. In Florida, they have the right to fine somebody, to give them a warning, or to put them in jail. Literally, if I work on an RV that is not mine, and I'm not licensed, I can be put in jail with a felony for working on a propane system without a license. Other states, it's an RV, no big deal, just be careful. So it just kind of depends on the state. I like the fact that Florida is careful about it. And it's something to be aware of. When you have somebody work on your RV, it's not a bad idea to make sure that they've got some formal training, no matter what state you're in, and what their experience level is. I was telling somebody this morning, there's a story of a customer or a person, an RV owner. They just bought the RV a couple weeks earlier. They had just moved into it this last 2 to 3 days. Read about this last night. They smelled propane, but they inspected the whole vehicle. They couldn't find anything. They didn't look in one of the cabinets they couldn't get the door open. They were like, whatever. So they finally called a technician and said, we can't get rid of this trouble. We turned off the tanks and the technician told them, turn off the tanks, I'll be right there. Technician comes out, finally gets into that cabinet. And when he opens the cabinet, he gets a face full of propane smell. And he instantly backs away from the RV, gets everybody out of the area. He looks inside. Previous owner had changed out the stock water heater, which is a gas electric, to a 110 volt electric propane or electric water heater without propane. Well, when they did this, they had disconnected the propane line and just laid it beside. So it was an open propane line into a sealed storage compartment that was in that rig. Hence, we have inspections available. Remember that. That would have been something that would have been found in an inspection. So fortunately, the tech was able to seal up the line, prove it was sealed, and prove the rig was safe. Okay, how about some simple fixes? I have had all of these calls. Who here does not know what a water heater bypass is? We're going to look at some pictures of it. So when you winterize, or maybe you just bought your RV and it's been delivered, The RV came down from, let's say, Ohio or Michigan or wherever the dealer got it from. It was winterized up there. And when they do that, they set the water heater bypass a certain way. They'll set it just like this. Your cold line is shut off. Cold comes in at the bottom, hot out at the top. The cold line is shut off. This bypass line is opened up, and the top line is shut off, just like it is. That's a bypassed water heater. So obviously, you're never going to get hot water out of that thing, okay? Now, what happens is many people, when they go to use the water heating system, they say, oh, this valve's closed. I got to open it up. And they'll open up the top one, but they leave this one open. So the water heats up, it successfully works, but they go to turn on the faucet, and within 30 seconds, the water's cold. Starts getting warm. They think they're going to have hot water, wash their hands, wash their dishes, goes cold. It's because you're literally bypassing the water heater and sending cold back out through there. So it's kind of an expensive call to have me show up and turn that valve. That's one thing you can check and make sure. The other thing that happens, the same type of situation, you know your outside shower, that's really good, wash off your feet, wash off Fido, make sure everything's good. Some people will turn on those valves, and the shower head has a little click handle to turn it off. If both of those valves are open, you have a bypass situation where water will go in from the cold into the hot and back into your rig and flow backwards. There's nothing to separate those two channels when you have both those knobs open. So if you use a little shower handle clicker thing, either in your main shower or your outside shower, or if you have a water heater bypass, you'll experience a sudden loss of hot water that's unexpected. Those are the first things to check. This is a different type of water heater setup. You'll notice there's only one valve. There's a valve right here, very conveniently set up with the handle on the wrong side. And what's happening here is the handle is set flat, so water will go into the cold, out the hot, and it may or may not go up or down there, but this valve is shut off here and it's going straight across. When you bypass this system, you're turning the valve straight up. Water will come in here, up here. It can't go in the hot because the hot has a one-way check valve at the exit. So it won't go backwards into the tank. It'll stay where it needs to stay. But that's how you can run if you don't see three handles on your system. Another thing I was talking about is fuses. Make sure if you have a problem with something not running that you check. Over here on the left, we have circuit breakers. On the right, we have fuses. And how many people want to wager money that all those labels are correct? Right? Is that worth a wager? Definitely. And what they've done to try to help people is they put little LED lights next to the fuse. So let's say we're running our hot water heater and all of a sudden or let's say our furnace, and all of a sudden our furnace isn't working. And we go to the fuse panel and we say, well, if it's a fuse, the little LED will be telling me, it'll be lit up and it'll be telling me the fuse has failed. Most of the time that works just fine. But there are times that those fuses can blow that it will not blow enough to kick on the light. So any one of those fuses in that panel can be failed right now, and we wouldn't know it. That can happen. False positive. Okay? The other thing that can happen is the light can be lit up and the fuse can actually be good. So my lesson here is don't trust those little lights. Take out the fuse, use a meter, and check it. If you don't know how to use a digital multimeter, number one, I know a lot of people who wouldn't even get near that panel. They'd say, I'm not going to pull a fuse. And that's fine. This is a point of that electrical safety. But if you feel comfortable doing it, use needle nose pliers or your fingertips on that right side, pull that fuse out, check it with a meter. And when you prove that the fuse is good, put it in. With the one caveat that still you can check a fuse and it might fail under load, but be okay without a load. If things don't make sense, it's worthwhile to take a known good fuse out of a packet, put it in there, see if that solves the problem. Okay? Circuit breakers too. Looks like every one of them is turned on perfectly. I can guarantee you many times they're not. One of them is not turned on perfectly, and it's just loose in the setting. It's always helpful, turn it off, turn it back on if you think that there might be an issue. For example, the microwave is marked as the first one up, that 15 first up, and your microwave's not working. Not a bad idea to turn it off, turn it on, see if it resets. Simple fix, simple check. Okay, my favorite little fitting, PEX swivel fittings. This was an actual repair I did in the park several weeks ago. This was after I repaired it. Notice that the center of the fitting is brass. That's key. Number one, when you see these fittings on a faucet or other connector, please don't use a wrench. Use your fingers. They're meant to be finger tight. Over tightening can split them, can cause problems. This is another repair I've done in the park. Same type of fitting. They're called PEX swivel fittings. Goes from a PEX line, plastic, to a nut in here. This one and that one are both leaking. And they are the number one culprit of freshwater fails by far, is this PEX swivel fitting. Now, you'll also find elbows and T's and other plastic fittings in there, but the PEX swivel fitting, somehow, the plastic version just seems to be a very weak seal here between this plastic cap and the plastic housing, or the plastic stem. So the first thing I do when I see that is I'll come in, cut the PEX, put in my brass counterpart, clamp it, done. Very simple fitting, or very simple fix. In order to work on these, just need the crimpers, and there's 3 or 4 different styles. That's a general crimper that's done these days. And you need a PEX cutter and some extra fittings. Now you'll notice I showed, actually there's 3 lines with 2 types of fitting. The one with the green arrow is the type that this crimper makes. The other advantage to this is there's a little white dot on the body of the crimper. When you're using the crimper and it's done right, that will light up. It'll be a bright blue light that lights up and says, you're crimped, you're good. That's how you know it's solid. If you see me working on plumbing, you'll see my little crimper light go off. This is another type of PEX crimp. This is a classic style, a copper ring over the fitting. I don't like these because they are harder to do, harder to get off, harder to manipulate. There are times that we have to remove the clamps in order to work in very tight spaces. So I don't like to use these, but they're still available. Just know that this type of crimp tool is for a band, not a bite crimp fitting. All righty, moving right along. Any other questions or concerns on simple fixes or plumbing? Okay. I'm going to implore you to install an EMS. The common term for this is a surge protector. The reality is those little boxes hanging from the posts are so much more than surge protectors. Brownout protectors, if there's a problem with the frequency, those kind of things. An EMS looks at the power coming in and makes sure it's of a particular quality. If that quality goes down, one of several measures, it will shut off and deny power to your RV. With the caveat that no EMS made is designed to withstand a nearby lightning strike. There are several manufacturers that say we will not warranty against a direct lightning strike. Sorry, a little bit more power than we're used to. One of them, and I'll show you a picture of it, I used to have it, has the ability to bypass. On its little controller, it just says bypass EMS. And there was one summer I was getting so frustrated with the power dropping out in the RV park. And it was just frustrating. I knew what was happening. It was dropping down to about 109 volts. And that's really at the threshold, that's a little bit below the threshold of where you should be operating. So the EMS was doing its job. It was cutting out. But I was worried about it. So I thought, oh man, should I go ahead and bypass that? And somebody reminded me, they said, no, your EMS is doing its job. If you let that bad power into your rig, you could fry your microwave, your automatic transfer switch, your circuit panel, any number of devices in your rig, computers, your Lippert One control that does everything in your rig could be fried by that power. So I'm going to implore you to get an EMS if you don't already have one. Second one, if you smell a burning odor or an odd odor like sour eggs, shut off power at the post and figure it out before you do anything else. Don't say, I'll worry about it later. There have been 2 incidences over the last couple months of people having very dangerous situations, and they fortunately did that. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. These are the type of devices I'm talking about, EMS. This is a device that I used to have hardwired in our rig. It's got a little control panel with a switch that just shuts off and bypasses the EMS in case you need to run power. Probably the worst idea ever. Hey, I'm protecting your rig, but here, you can turn me off when you're having trouble. So, had a customer recently that called their motorhome manufacturer. They said, hey, my AC unit is having a problem operating. Every time I go to turn it on, the EMS says that it's doing a load shed. Now, they have a 50 amp system. They're on a 50 amp site. And I scratched my head. I said, well, something's wrong with that. But they called the manufacturer, and the manufacturer said, no, just go ahead and shut off the EMS. And I told the customer, I said, you know, can we test that system? Because shutting off the EMS opens your unit to danger. We tested the system had failed. It was drawing way too much power. It should never be running. So the EMS was doing its exact job and intended function. So, all right. A couple of examples of failed electrical systems. The one on the left is one of the issues I talked about. That was underneath the customer's bed. 4 a.m. woke them up, arcing and causing that. I don't want to scare people. This is not a common thing, but it is a real thing. It does happen. One of the first things I did when I opened this up, if you notice, the wire that's burnt in here is white. There's 2 more white wires. That's the neutral side of power. When you saw the circuit breakers earlier, those are all on the black side of wiring. Circuit breakers protect the hot side of wiring. There's nothing to protect the white side. And that's why in the other picture, all those wires that are kind of brownish used to be white. That's because the white wires heat up and cool down over time. One of your checklist items every year should be to have a qualified person open up your circuit panel and check that all of these lugs are tight. Over time, the wires will heat up, they will cool down, they will expand, they will contract, those screws will loosen. RV manufacturers don't help this because every once in a while, and I don't know if it happened here, every once in a while they'll put 2 wires into a single spot. So now you've got double the expansion, double the contraction. So it's very useful, and it's something I always do when I'm around a power panel that I'm working on. I will check the tightness of those lugs. When I checked these 2 wires, the other 2 wires turned about 1/3 to 1/2 turn. They were definitely loose. So at least I was able to determine the likely cause of that failure. When we replaced this device, it was the same manufacturer, same model number device, but they had switched to a clamp terminal that can't loosen like that. So it was definitely a solid solution. This is, other than the PEX fittings, this is my Nemesis device, an RV outlet. This is also in mobile homes and most park models. It's different. What I don't have here is a comparison. In a residential setting, they have screw terminals on the side. You take your residential wire, curl it over the screw, and tighten the screw down. It's a solid connection. Here, I've drawn 3 lines to represent the hot, the ground, and the neutral, the white wire on the right. They take the wire and they slip it in between a couple of metal connectors and literally just push it in between the connector. On a production line, that's pretty quick, isn't it? Strip the wire out, lay it in, push it down, put the outlet in the wall, and you're done. Okay? Much faster than a residential connection. So that's why they use it. The problem is, even on my own rig, so my rig, we're 3.5 years now that we've been in the rig. And 4 months ago, we had a set of outlets fail. So I went to the first outlet that I thought was closest to the panel, where the panel was feeding it, And I checked that. As I pulled that out of the wall, I heard some crackling in the outlet. They had put 3 wires into that set, and the outermost wire was the one that was hot coming from the panel, and it was loose in the outlet. And I've replaced a electrical outlet behind a fireplace in a trailer in the park, and that one had failed because a wire came out of that setup. So my point here is that if you have outlets fail in your RV, and it's kind of unexpected, right? The expected failures is, chair ran into it and bumped it or whatever, but if it's unexpected, first thing to check is shut off your breaker, and then we can check that. Again, I don't want anybody going in and checking this if they're not qualified or don't understand the dangers and how to make it safe, but it is something to look at. Okay? All right, my last point. This is a product that I use for slide seal. There's probably 10 different products out there that are all very capable. Slide seals are intended to be moved around, intended to be pliable, soft, and they rub on the side of your slides going in and out. And this product, 3-in-1 rubber seal conditioner, you just take it on a rag, wipe it on the inside of the seal and on the outside of the seal all the way around your slide out. Do that once or twice a year, and your slide seals will stay soft, they'll bend real well, they'll stay sealed up, and things will be good. Okay? Like I said, this is not the only product. This is what I use. I find it to be a good product, and it does, because it does have that oil component in it, it does reduce the friction on your slide going in and out, which for some of our slides are at max capacity, so it's real good to help those slide motors as much as you can. Okay, so that's all the material I had prepared for you today. 3 weeks from today, February 22nd. And the other thing I want to say is I'm on our website, and I will publish this on the Best Life site when I get it set up. On our website, I'm going to have a button there for feedback and questions related to this series. Getting feedback and getting input about what you would like to see covered will help me deliver a useful presentation for you. So on session number 2 and session number 3, I would definitely love your feedback, even if you can't be here. What would you like? We'll have them recorded and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much for your